look, he was warned not to return. He did. He was arrested. Was there an option to try to continue opposition from outside of Russia? Would that have been logical? Is it just too important to not be intimidated, as it were?
There's a long tradition of people who are exiled outside Soviet Union before, now Russia, who are really not very effective when they're outside. Navalny knew he had to go back to remain effective. And going back put the Kremlin in a bind. If it detains him for longer than a couple of weeks, he could become a martyr. On the other hand, if it doesn't detain him, the Kremlin could look weak.
So what is your view on what will happen from here in terms of which option they'll take?
It's hard to predict, but if the past is any guide, they'll detain him for a couple of weeks and then let him go. Navalny's arrest today, all the demonstrations, supporters for him, that will be viewed on YouTube probably tomorrow by millions or tens of millions of people in Russia. Navalny made a YouTube video when he was in Berlin accusing the Kremlin of poisoning him, and that was viewed 40 billion times, mostly all of that, of course, in Russia. So it gives you some idea of the reach that he has. He doesn't have an organized political party. That's not possible to develop in Russia as an opposition party, but he has thousands or tens of thousands of people who are willing to help him organize protests, and he's organized protests in dozens of cities.
So you mentioned those staggering viewing numbers. Is there a sense of sentiment shifting in Russia? We had the tape, of course, of this agent. He was tricked into thinking he was talking to some sort of handler and admitted to this attempted assassination. We've got the Kremlin standard denials, but is there a shift of whether or not people, masses in Russia, still believe the Kremlin at all, or are still scared enough of the government to continue to toe the line?
Independent pollsters from the Levada Center have found that really only 15–20% of Russians believe that the Kremlin tried to poison Navalny. So this testifies to the effectiveness of propaganda and disinformation inside Russia. But over time, this could change.
And what would be a trigger for it? Because the sort of deal, if you like, for want of a better word, that Putin has with his country is he's helped turbocharge the economy. Well, that right now is on the precipice. You've got oil prices so low, such a huge part of the Russian economy, and of course, not a good handling of COVID, and even the Russian vaccine not going all that well. Is that his biggest threat? If the economy really does hit the skids, will people sort of happy with the trade-off of freedom for economic benefit will start to change their minds?
Yes, Tom, that's a critical point. In the 2000s, partly because of rising oil prices, Russia's GDP and GDP per capita increased substantially. But after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, Russia has really been in economic stagnation. After 2014, when oil prices went down and the West imposed sanctions because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, disposable household incomes may have gone down by 15% or so. With the COVID crisis, they've gone down more. So disposable household incomes in real terms now could be maybe a fifth lower than they were before. That appears to be one of the reasons why we see more discontent. For example, protests against pension reform.
The key, of course, often when we're asking this question of a strong-arm leader going is who else? Who do they get pushed out by? Is there a clear candidate, and is there hope that it will be somebody less abrasive than Putin?
Media controls do not allow other political people to become prominent. So Navalny has had to do this through exposés of corruption published on YouTube channels. They've had a big impact. But again, he has no organized political party. There's no other obvious person to succeed Putin within the system. But if changes were to occur in Russia, political openings were to occur, new leaders could arise, just as they have arisen now in Belarus after the public protests that started last August.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy, and I guess it will rely on a lot of bravery from Alexei Navalny and perhaps some others. We do appreciate your time today, William Courtney. Thank you.
You're welcome.